Welcome everyone to the AnimeCons TV 2021 year in review. It's been a year, but despite everything, we're still gonna go through with our tradition of having our year in review and talk about it. So before we get too far along, I'm just gonna have everyone else introduce themselves in case people forgot who else is on this podcast. Don't all jump up.
Because there are other people besides Doug on this podcast, which is surprising if you've watched it for the last 2 years. Doug has been in every episode. Woo, Doug!
Thanks, Doug. MVP.
Keep it alive.
All right, so
but we're introducing ourselves.
Yeah, you go first.
Yeah, well, I'm Patrick Delahanty. I run fancons.com and I edit this podcast you're watching right now.
I'm Elizabeth O'Malley. I used to do stuff and I should do more stuff now that life stuff is out of the way.
I'm Shiva.
I'm Ruben.
Shut up. Yeah, and we used to cosplay and go to cons and stuff before we became like recluses and rebuilt our whole house.
From scratch.
Yeah. So maybe we'll do stuff again soon.
best accessory.
Wow.
That is an inside joke for those.
That's a throwback.
Okay. Well, a few of us did actually get to a couple conventions here and saw some stuff. So I'm just going to say kind of which ones did we do and stuff like that. Elizabeth, you can start, or I can start, whichever you want to.
I'll start. So I went to Kraken Khan in Atlanta and I went to PAX Unplugged in Philadelphia. Both events were vaccine mandated and masks required all weekend, and they're both pretty good. So it was good to get back into things, and both did a really good job of handling everything that's going on, and I'm really glad I went to both of them. So yeah, those are the two that I was able to get in this year.
Okay. Patrick, you did you do any of the hybrid PortCon?
Yeah, I was at PortCon Maine. I went to some of the panels they had online. All the panels and all the programming was online. And the only stuff they had at the con was the dealer's room, the artist alley, and some of their BAFA, their sword fighting that was outside. And yes, it was an interesting hybrid event. And yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was good to be back at a con, even if it was just kind of like cautious the whole time.
Yeah. So I went to two conventions myself. I went to Otakon, which of course I did a whole convention report on, and they had a mask requirement throughout. And that was pretty good. I thought there was a lot of good, clear policy, clear enforcement of it from everybody. Like, you saw signage about it everywhere and stuff like that. The only other convention I went to this year was Rhode Island Comic-Con, which technically had a mask policy, but it was not enforced. Like, it was barely even enforced. And I was helping run a booth there with members of the 501st Rebel Legion, Mandalorian Mercs, the Star Wars costumers in New England, and even like trying to get people that were in our area to say, "Hey, can you put on a mask?" Most people were like, "Oh yeah, let me adjust it or grab it out of my pocket." But the thing that really stood out to me was they didn't announce that mask policy till really late. You only saw it a few places, like a sign maybe this big, and like a few places and just no one was really enforcing it and stuff like that. And the thing that really frustrated me, from someone who's worked at conventions and been to many conventions now, was seeing this convention not enforce it amongst their own staff, and seeing the convention center staff, like people working in the building, not enforce it. And for me, I looked at that and just thought, this is something where you need to really lead by example. If everyone on the convention center staff is following it and everyone on the convention, like the events staff is following this guideline, this will go really well and everyone will follow. But it just seemed to be lip service. And it's another on the long list of items that really frustrated me about Rhode Island Comic Con. And I know I saw several people that were there one day, saw how poorly it was being enforced, and everything, and just said, you know what, I'm not coming back. It's not worth the risk. And it was very interesting seeing the contrast in the two events. And neither one had a vaccine requirement, but even a mask policy, if you're going to have it, you got to enforce it, because just, yeah. So it was really frustrating. But as Patrick mentioned and Elizabeth mentioned, going to see a physical con, both times I really found myself, when I saw friends that I knew or just like an exhibitor that I always look forward to, it reminded me how much I missed it. And it's like I didn't realize how much I was missing it until it was there in front of my face. But of course, a bunch of us missed cons either because we opted out for safety concerns or the con just didn't happen. Is there any con that you really missed in 2021, either for whatever reason? Patrick, why don't you start again? If there's anyone that you really missed?
Yeah, I haven't gone to just one physical con since 2000, other than last year and this year. And I'm so used to going to a dozen cons or so a year that I miss going to cons. And one of my favorite cons was Kraken Khan, which was out in Oakland, California. And that wasn't taken out by the pandemic. They ended that the year before. They ended that in 2018. We didn't come back because, trying to get hotels and the Bay Area is just insane. It's so expensive. So we can't afford to do this. But I missed that con. It was so much fun. And I want to go out to other cons and see if I can find something like that again somewhere else. But it's not the same anymore. And yeah, I miss seeing all you guys going and hanging out at cons.
Yeah. Shiva and Sketch, how about you guys? I know you guys didn't get to any conventions. Was there any that you guys missed?
Yeah, I mean, it was such a weird year not going to any. And sometimes I even forget we went to one last year because it was so early in the year that it's crazy.
Yeah.
I actually really miss going to Anime Boston, honestly. I think
it's home.
It's our hometown convention. It doesn't involve the stress of traveling. We know everybody there. I think our son had finally gotten old enough where we probably would have brought him for more of it, which would have been fun. So it was a little sad not to be able to do that. And then not see all of our friends. I think if I could have gone to one this year, I mean, that wasn't even a possibility. It didn't happen, and rightfully so, because it was so early in the year. But I think that's the one I probably missed the most.
And Elizabeth or Sketch, whoever.
Yeah. Oh, Sketch wants to go first.
Well, I mean, obviously, it's also sad not being able to go to Dragon Con, but it's like, okay, I really can't go forward, risk it, just my personal situation, I couldn't go. So I was like, oh, well, at least see the stuff online. But
I feel like we vicariously lived through people that went for most of that this year.
You're welcome. No, I missed, I was looking, before the pandemic happened, I was starting to look into more. There were some in the New England area. There were a lot of one-day comic book shows that looked like that was a trend, that these one-day comic book shows, like local events with just a couple hundred people, were starting to pop up more and more. Like I've talked about Plastic City Comic Con in the past, in like the Leominster Fitchburg area, and that ended up being canceled. And that was in July, and that one was kind of, or maybe it was supposed to be in August. It was definitely in the summer. And I feel like that one, I bet that was like a really close, tough decision of like, all right, we can't do it. So that one was one that I missed. And just I've been watching these small one-day comic book shows and gaming cons. that were in the area and had them on my radar. And those are things I've really missed because those were events that I was really looking forward to checking out because it's just so much easier to go and you don't even have to spend like the whole day. And especially like the gaming shows, you can find new games and play new games. And that was kind of thing I was bummed about.
Yeah. I'll definitely echo a lot of the sentiment of missing Anime Boston. It is, as we've said, it's our hometown convention. It's basically how all of us here on the podcast became friends and solidified those friendships. But there was another one. I did not get to Anime NYC this year, and I had been planning on it. Just kind of where life events that happened, I really didn't have a chance. And with where things went, you could say that's a blessing in disguise or not. But it was also
dodged a bit of a bullet there.
Yeah, I did, but at the same time, like anyone I know that did go, like they were very responsible. As soon as there was, any news of it, everyone was getting tested. A couple people like did a couple tests just to be sure, and thankfully, no one I knew personally caught anything. But there was still like just seeing a few of the posts. It was like, oh man, I miss this. I've always had a good time at that con, and it was weird. It was tough because I made the right decision for me personally not to go, but even making the right decision can still hurt a little. But also with 2021, there's some other kind of convention things that really took place kind of within the convention world, and I'm going to bring up two kind of bummer topics. Unfortunately, we talked about Anime Boston, and of course, one person that was a big part of Anime Boston for so many people was our staff member Digit, better known as Rhodey, who was the Masquerade MC for several years, and he unfortunately passed away this year, and that really sucked because everyone that interacted with him he always was generous with time. For someone who was a kind of a pinch hitter to host the Masquerade, he became an institution of Anime Boston, and when Anime Boston comes back, it's going to really hurt and be bittersweet not having him there. But I know there's a lot of people already people want to honor his memory and things like that. But that's going to be one thing that happened in 2021 that's going to kind of leave a mark. And the other one, of course, also a longtime guest of Anime Boston, and way more cons than I could ever hope to attend, was Chris Ayers. His passing, which was another kind of big shock, and not just at Anime Boston, but every convention he went to, he lit up the room, brought joy to so many of us. And when he passed, seeing all the stories of awesome things he did for people at conventions, encouraging them to kind of be the best person they could, share a good time and everything like that. And kind of one of the things that I always said was he wasn't someone who was just having a good time. He was making the good time. He was making the convention a more welcoming space for everybody. And if you ever saw him on the guest list for a convention, any attendee that was going to go to any of his events was going to be in for a treat because he knew how to tell a story. He could give acting lessons for people in masquerades or just mock combat and things like that. And so many people just had great stories. The fact that people would cosplay as Chris Ayers to conventions that he was at, I think says a lot right there. Like, not a character he was doing, just cosplayed as Chris. So
when we were planning Providence Anime Conference, he was one of the first guests that came to mind because he wasn't just a voice actor. He hosted great panels and great workshops. He was truly knowledgeable, and he was also just a fun guy to be around. And we all loved him. And whenever I had the opportunity to have him in Anime Unscripted, it was an absolute pleasure. He loved that game, and I loved having him in that game. He introduced several new games to Anime Unscripted. Three-Headed Professor was always, ever since he introduced that to me, I've had it in every time I've done Anime Unscripted. And that's certainly going to continue. Probably do it first in Boston just as a tribute to him. But yeah, he was a good friend and one of the first people we interviewed on the podcast. And
Anime Unscripted at Providence Anime Conference was like the best anime unscripted. He did a lot of them. That one was amazing.
Yeah. So
like both of those and I know we're closely connected to the anime boxing community, and that's rough on us, but I imagine that a lot of other communities and conventions have gone through the same thing over the past couple of years of losing people who are important to them, and it just shows how rough of a 2 years this has been for a lot of people. And it's funny. The funny thing about Brody, about Digit, is I first knew him from, he would call into one of the local sports radio stations that when did I start listening to that station? Like 2008 or something? And I remember hearing his name, Digit, from calling in to back when it was 104.1 before it was 98.5. If you're from Boston, you actually know what those numbers mean. So I that name for me even goes back further of someone was such a huge presence, and he did a lot of good through that too. I know there was fundraising things he did connected to sports as well, and the story of how he was just such a selfless person. The way he stepped up at Anime Boston, last minute to run the masquerade. I don't know anyone who could have nailed it the way he did. And
wow, that was amazing. I remember that we so happened, and we were like, how is this guy going to pull this off? It was 2011, right? Mm-hmm. And I remember being nervous for him. I didn't even know him at the time, but he was amazing.
Yeah.
Good to heckle, because he heckles back.
He was never shy of taking anyone down a peg, including himself. But I think, just to kind of end that on a bit more upbeat note, I think we'll see a lot of really positive tributes, and I think there's already a lot of people who have said, the best way to kind of honor these legacies are by, being the best person we can be at conventions and making conventions a better place for everyone. So I'm glad to see that that's something that's going to continue and endure. And I think the other thing I'll just say is just remind the people in your life that make your conventions better, that you're glad they're there, because we all go to conventions to see people. We can do so much of this stuff online. We can shop online, we can watch anime online, everything like that. But it's meeting these people and having these interactions that really make these events. So yeah. But moving forward, how are you guys feeling about cons for next year, for 2022? Do you think cons need to figure out some procedures or anything like that? What's something you guys are thinking about or feeling about for 2022?
So, like I said, both the events that I went to were vaccine mandated. I think Kraken Khan, I don't remember if they allowed a negative test too. I know some cons it's vaccine or recent negative test, and then masks. And for me, that's going to be the baseline benchmark minimum. You guys know what I mean. Words are hard. That's going to be the minimum requirement for me to go is to have that in place. And I think also next year isn't going to be a year where I check out any new conventions, because for me, I want to go someplace that I'm familiar with, and I know what the venue is like. So like actually with both Dragon Con and PAX Unplugged, we're in pretty big venues. So like Dragon Con, it's in a bunch of hotels and it's very open, but you're also like you're moving a lot unless you're at an event, you're not like really staying in the same place at once. You're doing a lot of walking around, and that's the other thing, everything felt open. And PAX Unplugged is at the Philadelphia Convention Center, is like hugely open. The ceilings are gigantic, and there's like a lot of like just space. And it also wasn't very crowded this year. It's never been super crowded like compared to PAX East, but this year felt even less so. I think just because people were apprehensive about going. And for me, the event will need to have that. Like, I'm not gonna say which one, but there's an event like I've usually go to that I'm not going to because there's certain places that are just so crowded and so many people, and I don't know how they're gonna enforce making sure people are have like have a vaccine or are masked. Just because of how the venue is set up. And even Anime Boston, it's like I'm a little like, once you get in the convention center, you're good. It's open, but a lot of it is also in the Sheraton, which is connected to a mall. And that's like a wild card almost. But that's also not till May. So I'm thinking of other conventions that are in more of like a hotel setting where it's much closer facilities. Like there isn't a lot of room to move around. Like I'm thinking, I don't know of a convention there now, but like the one that comes to mind is the hotel that another anime convention used to be at in Nashua. Like there's not a lot of room to move around in. So like if there's a convention I'd go to there, I'd probably be like, I don't think so. So like for me, it's having those rules in place, having it be a convention I know is going to be able to enforce them, and then a place with a lot of room. That's kind of my mindset, having gone to a couple conventions and thinking about the ones I want to go to.
Yeah, I totally agree, because a lot of those small to mid-sized hotels, they don't have a lot of space between the function rooms. It's narrow hallways and it gets crowded in the middle. And but when you get your Atlanta Marriott Marquis, the big thing, okay, that's a little more open, and I feel more comfortable. But yeah, I'm not going to be in any crowded panel rooms, even fully vaccinated. I'm just not comfortable. Plus, I got a little one at home that's not vaccinated, so I don't really bring it home to me. And but yeah, like with PortCon, it was in a hotel and it gets fairly crowded. But this year, because everything was online, people come, they check out the deals from the art gallery, and they go home and watch the panels. So that hallway that's normally packed with people, empty. And, people came, they check it out. You only have to check out the dealers for one day, really. It's because you're not there for panels. It's not, I got to wait till the next panel. What am I doing? I'll just hang out here. Yeah, so it cut the crowds down. So that worked well. And hopefully other cons that don't have a large venue can consider doing a hybrid model. So, have your dealers room, but put it at home.
Yeah, I feel like it's the same for us. I mean, we didn't go this year, but just seeing the pictures of Dragon Con and how spread out it was, considering how crowded it normally is, and seeing every photo, it seemed like almost everybody was masked. And Elizabeth went, and your sister went, and all the reports we got was everyone felt very comfortable. And didn't they even have like rapid testing stations like around the convention?
Yeah.
Not like around the convention. I think they had something set up, but it wasn't like.
There was at least 3. One in the Sheraton where the registration was. One in the furthest away hotel. There. Okay. The other one was, I think, some miscellaneous place. But they offered it.
Wasn't really. I'll be honest, it wasn't well publicized because I didn't really see them.
That was a negative I did hear from my sister. So she liked that it was there, but she didn't really see much like promotion that you could do stuff. But
yeah, and you guys know how I am about finding this kind of stuff. it doesn't have to be just on the surface of the level. Like, I will look in every nitty gritty detail. No, I didn't even. I saw that they were partnering like with some places for testing, but I thought it was just kind of like for like Atlanta residents or whatever. So.
Well, they could have done that better then, because considering how much they push their blood drive, they know how to promote something. I mean, but I think kind of like what you guys were saying, I'd feel more comfortable if it was more spread out with a bigger space. I can't imagine, like, you know, as you mentioned, like the Otakon hallways or the AAC hall, like that would just the idea of it. I've never been someone who was scared of crowds, but ever since this thing, it's made me very uncomfortable. And then, you know, I don't think I'd feel comfortable without it being like a vaccine mandate and a mask mandate and it actually being enforced. I think that was the scary thing about hearing about Rhode Island Comic Con, is that people went with the expectation that that would be enforced and then it wasn't, which is scary. I also can't see myself next year, especially with the uncertainty of everything going on, that we're still not in a place where we can just like vaccinate our way out of this, traveling anywhere far yet. I mean, I just can't see it right now. I mean, again, we also have a kid that's not old enough to be vaccinated at home, and we have parents who are high risk, and it's just, it's hard to plan. So I think if I did something, it would probably be nearby.
Yeah, we last month, because my kid is a huge fan of trains, we went to a local train show. And so he could see all the train layouts and everything. And we got there early, and there weren't a lot of people, and everybody was masked, so okay, this feels safe. And then more people started to show up, and half of them weren't wearing masks. We're like, oh, we're not enforcing this. Time to go. Bye. We've seen enough. We got out of there. Just didn't feel comfortable anymore. And I think that's going to be typical of a lot of these cons.
Well, and my niece went to Dragon Con, and whenever she felt uncomfortable, she just went back to the hotel room and looked at Dragon Con TV. So at least she had like that ability, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I need out. Yeah.
I need out. I can still witness and participate.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, that was our backup plan at Dragon Con. We also actually had some like outdoorsy local area things to do in case like we're like, no, we're kind of like not good with the convention. We're gonna go do this other stuff. It's funny because we actually did that in Philadelphia. We went at PAX Unplugged. We ended up Saturday going to a cat cafe for the afternoon, and then on Sunday we went to the Mutter Museum, which is like medical oddities and medical history museum. And what helped was the city of Philadelphia itself has a mask mandate, so both places were just masks everywhere, which was nice. So that helped with like, even though we just wanted to go do other stuff. It's not like we ever felt like unsafe at the convention at all. But yeah, we definitely had that backup plan in Atlanta. Just like, oh, we'll go in the room and watch Dragon Con TV or a movie, or we'll go do another thing. So I think that's also, if you're going to travel to a convention, like maybe have a backup plan of something else to keep yourself entertained if you're like, I don't really feel okay at this con right now.
Well, that's actually a really good point. This is something to consider when you research a convention, is what else is in the area. And I mean, we've all kind of reached that point where we know that if we're going to a convention in an area we've never been to, we kind of look, oh, what else is in the area? I mean, we don't make it a full vacation that like, oh, well, we're going to do all these 20 other things while we're in this area. But knowing just a handful of things to get away if you're traveling for a convention sometimes can be a good difference. And especially in an area where it's like you can it's a short trip away or you can walk to it, I think really does help, especially nowadays when it's easier to feel overwhelmed at a convention. I mentioned at Otakon, I was in an AMV screening room and it started getting really warm, and I noticed I was starting to feel nervous, and I actually had to leave the room, which felt really weird because AMVs is usually one of my favorite activities to check out when my schedule permits, and I actually left the room because it was getting so warm in there and I did not feel comfortable. but I think we'll see people wear more masks of going forward and stuff like that. And one of the things I was seeing at any convention that was good for a mask policy is people used it as an opportunity to get creative and incorporate it into their costume, either make something that matched or just, it's a, the logo of something they really like from the whatever they're cosplaying from too. So they kept it kind of on theme. And I think people are going to try and continue that.
Yeah, those furries, they get this all down. They're all prepared for this.
Yeah.
Yeah, the two costumes I made were for me and Kevin. We did Eddie and Barney Rubble a little bit at Kraken Khan, mostly to get his feet wet with this whole cosplay thing. But yeah, I just used extra fabric from the costumes and just made sure I had good fabric that was on the inside of it, and so they just kind of, and it just looks like nice and streamlined. Like, yeah, it covers up a lot of your face, but it doesn't look bad. It was just because it matched same fabric. You're like, oh yeah, and then you'll look at it later on and be like, yeah, that was from 2021.
I always joke that it's finally time for me to make the gas mask for my Songo costume for the demon hunt.
But then we'll make a gas mask from Moroku, and then everyone else gets everyone gets a Songo mask.
Yeah, I've really been thinking I should really do Doc Brown before Anime Boston. The whole radiation suit. I could just do that.
So, anybody have any firm plans for attending conventions in 2022, though?
Loose. I have a potential hotel room for Dragon Con, which I could still give to somebody else if need be. And
yeah, I have a hotel room for Dragon Con too. So, fingers crossed. I'm actually so the day we're recording, PAX East tickets went on sale yesterday, and y'all know from past every year we've done this how much I love PAX East. Have not bought tickets yet, and they've already announced it's going to be vaccine mandated, mask mandated, but still at the same time it's going to wait. I'm most likely going to go one day, but it's weird that they went on sale and I wasn't boom, let's go like I have been in past years. So I'm going to see what happens when it gets closer. And also, I don't even think none of the tickets have sold out yet, which I don't think is indicative of what's going on. That's been a trend the past few years of PAX East no longer selling out. So at least not immediately like it used to in the past. But that, I'm pretty sure about Anime Boston, and I would actually really like to go back to PortCon. And right now, that's kind of all that's on my radar.
Yeah.
I'm back and plugged.
Yeah, Anime Boston and PortCon are the two that I'm pretty certain about. I'm on staff for Anime Boston still, and I'll be running game shows. And PortCon, it went so well last year. I think I trust them to do it right next year. And like you said, with all these cons doing the vaccination requirement, I think that's going to be more and more common. If only because the con can announce their event and say we're going to require vaccinations, and if things turn out better, they can step that back. But they can't really do the reverse and say, okay, whatever, and then add it later because it's just going to make people mad. Like, hey, you didn't say that was a requirement, now it is. But if they do the reverse, if it's a requirement, well, we don't need it anymore. That works. So.
Patrick, I think you and I are in the same boat that we're not allowed to ever quit Anime Boston staff. I think you would drag us to the convention even if we tried to avoid it. So Anime Boston's a definite for me. I'm because it's hometown convention, because I'm on staff and everything, and it's one of the conventions where it's been canceled twice because of everything. I really, really want to get back to it, and I've had I run a panel there. I'm on a staff position that is kind of the first time that actually going to happen. I'm looking forward to that. And I've got all these plans, and now that these plans have been stewing for 2 years now, I can't really wait to get back to them. So that's my one definite. Aside from Otakon, which I've been going to the longest, pretty much anything else is kind of wait and see how things go with just the world in general and their own policies. One that has become a pretty regular one for me, Anime Next, did the same thing of announced like clear, good policies early on that they can roll back in as things go. But I'm pretty sure I'm going to go to that one again, but kind of just depends where life takes me at this point. But definitely Anime Boston and Otakon. Those are the two definite for me. So this is kind of ends our year in review section. If you guys have any other thoughts on stuff for how the year went, don't forget to reach out to us. You can always email us at podcast@animecons.tv. You can get on our Twitter, which is just @AnimeConsTV. And don't forget, we have our voicemail line, which is 762-233-7828. Don't forget to...
Wait, 7628? No,
762. It's down at the bottom of the screen, right there.
Normally.
Wow, look at it. Yep, there it is.
Fancy.
But yeah, leave us a voicemail. We'd love to hear from you guys, especially after the year that's been very different for anime conventions. We'll see you guys soon.
Bye.
Bye.